Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. You know, I often get comments from folks who ask me about using electromagnets with KD uncouplers instead of using the permanent magnets. So today we're going to take a look at the ones that I use, the KD 309 electromagnetic uncouplers. So let's go ahead and take a look at how I put those kits together and install them on the layout. Hit that little red subscribe button, and when the little bell comes up, click on it and click all. First, we'll talk about how to put one of these together because they do come in a kit form, and so you do have to at least assemble the components. The magnet is pre-wired and pre-wound for you, so that's not an issue. And then we'll go ahead and cut a hole in the top of the roadbed and right on down through the baseboard to install the electromagnet. Now, let me just review one thing. Why use an electromagnet? If you are moving very slowly across a permanent magnet, and for some reason, you know, you get a stutter, your locomotive may suddenly skip a beat as it's moving along, or your cars may bunch up for some reason. If that happens and the tension is released on the couplers, on the cars, and they also happen to be over one of the permanent magnets, they can unexpectedly uncouple. And in a yard, when you're operating and switching cars, that's not that much of an annoyance. However, if you're creeping through town and running through a station area and you suddenly go over a permanent magnet and your cars separate, you know, that is more of a complication that you don't want. So that's why I use these electromagnets, because, you know, the magnet is only on when you push a button and electrify it. Otherwise, it will be off. So you can roll your cars through there and stutter and jump and everything, and they're not going to uncouple. And that's the great thing. You can stop and do your uncoupling after you push the button to activate the electromagnet. So that's why I use those, but they're also expensive, which is why I only use them on the main line. In my yards and industries and anything else like that, off of the main line, I go ahead and install the permanent magnets. What I want to do is I'm going to zoom in here a bit closer, and we'll go ahead and get started with putting one of these kits together. But before we go, I got one more thing I just remembered. Trivia of the day. Where does the name KD come from? Basically, back in 1940, twin brothers decided they were going to start a business making turnouts for model railroaders. Their names were Keith and Dale. So they decided to name their company based on their first two initials, K and D. So there's your name, KD. It's the phonetic spelling of their first initials combined. Okay, let's go ahead and zoom in here where I can show you how to put one of these kits together before we get started doing an installation. So let's take a look at what comes in the package. Okay, first we have the instructions. Don't throw those away. A package of parts. And then something on where to put your uncouplers. Put that in there. And these are the various parts, large parts. And then we have a small parts envelope here. I'm going to just dump it out here in front of you, like so. Be careful because there's a lot of very small screws in here. And then you've got 3 of these wood screw types with heads that can be recessed. So I don't use any of these little black screws. These can be used if you want to attach the electromagnet to the underside of your ties. I don't install it that way, so I'm going to show you a different way. And these guys here are used during part of the construction of the device itself. So I'm going to take all these little black ones here and put them back in the bag, and I have tons of these because I've never used them. Okay, another couple of things that I don't use. These electromagnets require something on the order of 16 to 18 volts at about 3 amps to operate, and it has to be DC power. In the instructions, they provide instructions on how to use AC power as well. And as you can see here on the back, They give detailed wiring instructions for various setups and various ways to power these. So you can power these with a DC power supply, you can power them with an AC power supply, and that's what the bridge rectifier is for. That converts AC to DC. And you need something like 16 volts DC at about 3 amps. If you have a 18 volt 3 amp power supply that is AC, you can use that with this bridge rectifier to produce DC power to operate the magnet. And they also include a capacitor here. Now this is a 470 microfarad 35 volt capacitor. And they show you how to wire this in. You can use this with DC power. So if you're using it with AC, then it has to be on the DC side of the bridge rectifier after you've converted to DC. You can't use this with straight AC. It's got to be on the DC power. Or you could use this with your DC power pack. And basically it serves as a power reserve for when you turn on your electromagnets, particularly if you're down in that lower end, if you're running at, say, 16 or 15 volts or something of that nature. And it just helps to smooth out the operation of the electromagnet. Since I use a 16 volt, 4 or 5 amp power supply, I've never used that either. So I have a whole bag full of these little guys. So I'm going to put those aside. And by the way, we're not going to get into how to wire this today. It's going to take enough time just to show you how to put it together and install it. And in a future video, we'll do a bunch of wiring and set all of these up. And I'll show you how to install the push buttons to activate them. So right now, though, let's see how to put this together. Okay, the first thing to be aware of, there's this steel roller here. That goes right here in the center of the electromagnet itself. Then you want to take these steel plates and you set those up so that, they're facing one another with these two flanges in opposite directions. So let me show you that real close. You can see how that is set up. You don't want to try to put them together that way, for example. They won't go together well. You need to have these set up just like that. Okay. Then you're going to put one on either side here and slide the bolt right through the middle of the whole mess. Then take your other two steel plates, put them together correctly, and insert them on the other side of the bolt. So we've got this set up. Now let me show you one other thing I want to point out before we go through with this. Right here, there is a small notch cut in the top of the plastic spool that comprises the magnet itself. Okay, that needs to be pointing up, and I'll show you why in just a minute. Okay, I'm going to put it back together with it pointed up. And with it set up properly, these wires should come out close to the bottom. So these are the wires that you're going to use to electrify the electromagnet. Now, at this point, we want to take this guy right here. And basically, you'll see it's got a little projection right here on the bottom, and then two prongs here. This little point here goes into that notch that I showed you on that white plastic spool. These two little projections, knobs, fit into the holes on the sides of these steel plates. So that slides in here, and I'm going to try to do this without dropping the whole thing. Okay. Like this. And then roll it around until you're sure you've got, the notch lined up properly. Okay. And then work it until you've got those little knobs inside of the steel plates properly. And this takes a little bit of just working it to get it to line up properly. Okay, and then make sure that you're, at that point, the spool, the white spool, should not rotate because it's been engaged by that little projection on this top plate, and that holds it and keeps it from rotating around. So that's what that little projection's for. And then the knobs also that fit into the holes on the steel plates. That keeps them from moving around too much. Then you just drop your nut over that and tighten it up some. Let me go ahead and do a little tightening here. That's all there is to that. Okay, so at that point, that part is together. Now, what about this guy here? Well, let me take a couple of pieces of flashing off of the side here so that it's going to fit together properly. There we go. That then fits right down in here, and you'll see it's got two places where these small screws fit. And those screws go through these recessed holes and down into the holes in the top of this top plate. So we're going to put that in there, drop one of these screws into the hole, like so, and then I've got to get my Phillips screwdriver and we'll drive that home. These are self-tapping screws, so they'll go ahead and go right down in there. Let me put this other one in and get it started. It's very tight, so get it down flush, but don't over tighten it, okay? Once it bottoms out, stop, because you don't want to strip the threads that you've just created. Okay, so there it is. At that point, you should have one of these screws left over. I keep those for later, and I'm going to use them here. They don't tell you where to use that third one. They tell you you get 3, but they only tell you to use 2 of them, so I assume it's an extra for you. Now, at this point, it's all put together. And when you add a DC current here, it's going to flow through those coils here that make the electromagnet. And then these field plates here are going to create an electromagnetic field that is lengthwise in shape. And it's going to pull your couplers to the sides just the way you want so you can uncouple properly. This needs to go down just a touch more. Now they will tell you that in some types of installations, let's say if you're putting this into the top of a piece of plywood baseboard, that you can cut these projections off and mount this flush with the top of the plywood, and then you can attach this to the bottom of your track ties. I don't do it that way. I prefer to do it the way I'm going to show you, mainly because I use cork roadbed and the foam, so I can use these to hold the electromagnet in place. But I'll show you how that's going to work. First thing though, we've got to cut a hole. So for that, I'm going to move in a little bit closer right here where I'm going to be doing the cutting. Okay, if you look at figure 2, you'll see they show you need a hole that is going to be 1 1/16 wide and 2 1/8 inch long. So what I did, I just took a piece of the envelope and I cut out a template to those dimensions. So what I want to do, here's where I'm going to install the electromagnet. I'm going to put this right down here on it. And I'm going to use my Sharpie to mark that outline, like so. Now, at that point, I'm going to get my razor knife, and I'm just going to cut right through the roadbed, the cork roadbed I installed. Okay, go right through on both sides of the line. And I have a knife, nice sharp putty knife. I'm just going to pop that nice cork roadbed that I laid out of there. There. So now we have an opening that will be just the right size for the magnet to fit in. Okay, now what we have to do though is open up a hole through here and down through the plywood. So let me show you that. Put this back in here again. Get it centered on the center line roughly there, because you want your electromagnet to be centered. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Mark it. So here and here. Now I'm going to get my knife again, and we're going to cut right down through there and come across. All the way down to the plywood, because we're going to take this foam out. Okay, that's that. Now, the next thing I want to do is pop that up out of there. So I'm just going to do like that. Okay, we have a nice clean hole that we can install the electromagnet in. Here's where things get noisy and messy, so bear with me. In order to drill a hole through here, I'm going to use a jigsaw. Now, I need to have a starter hole, and I'm going to put a, I think this is almost a 1/2 inch, maybe 3/8 inch hole here and here, diagonal corners as starter holes where I can insert the saw blade from my jigsaw and cut out this area. So I'm going to start here. Okay, I turned off the camera there and vacuumed out the hole that I made, got rid of all that mess. So let's go ahead and see if we can cut a hole here. I'm going to put one of these in here to give the saw blade out here, or the saw a place to ride. And now it's going to get noisy, so I probably will mute this in post-production, but let's go. So it fits right down through there, plenty of room for the magnet. I could have gone a little bit thinner actually. Okay, so here's where I'm going to show you how I do my mounting. So let me zoom in a little closer. So as you can see here, we have these two projections coming out on either end, and they are going to support the electromagnet itself, but we need to get those down flush so that the track and the ties are going to fit on top. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark this with a magic marker here and on this side. And then I'm going to use that as a template with my hobby knife here with the number 11 blade in it. And I'm just going to go ahead and outline those traces. We don't want to cut all the way through. We're just going to want to make a little shelf here that this can sit on. Okay, and I'm just going to cut it out to the same shape as I traced a minute ago. Okay, like that. And we'll do it over here too. Okay, I've switched knives now. I've got a number 17 X-Acto blade in here. And I'm just going to slide this into the side of the cork so that I can cut the upper portion of this, the upper half roughly, of this out. Let me try giving this a little bit of a try too. I think it'll cut better. There we go. Okay, so you can see we've got that little shelf created there on one side. Okay, let me go ahead and cut the other side here like this. There we go. Now let's do the other side here as well. And we should be able to get a good clean shelf set up. There. And bring this other cut through here. There. Now let's see how it's going to fit. Okay, you can see I've dropped it into place there, and it's a nice flush fit. So now here's what I'm going to do with those extra 256 screws that I've been saving for so long. I'm just going to run one of these down into here, into the cork, and that's going to stabilize it a little bit. This probably isn't necessary, but there we go, and that's it. So now we've got the magnet in place. It's centered in the middle of the roadbed so that the KD couplers, when it's activated, will go to opposite sides and they will be able to uncouple there. One final step in the process that you want to do, take and cut a couple of pieces of scrap cork from what you cut out here, just so that they will fit in here on either side of the electromagnet. And that is for the next step, because once you are going to start installing ballast and everything, you want to put down, and this is their recommendation, and I have found it to work fine, some aluminum or aluminium foil, depending on which country you're in. And what that will do is, you don't want to be dribbling scenic cement down through your ballast and down into an electronic device, okay? So in order to protect it, they recommend putting down this piece of aluminium foil, and that will then protect it as you lay your truck and ballast it. And I've done this with a number of these electromagnets, and it works fine afterwards. The aluminum foil is aluminum, it's not steel, so it will not interfere with the electromagnetic signal. So that's all you have to do, is put that in place, and it will take care of that potential problem for you. No issue at all. And it helps these scrap pieces of cork roadbed help to maintain the profile of the roadbed itself. It's a fairly straightforward process to put these together, to install them. You know, if I were going to do this on plywood without using any type of roadbed at all, I would still probably try to carve out a small place like this in the top of the plywood, as opposed to going the route that KD suggests of cutting these flanges off and attaching this to the underside of the track itself. This just makes it a lot easier installation, personally, I think. So that's how I go about putting together the electromagnets and installing them on the layout. Well, that's a wrap for today's video. Hopefully that gives you enough information to go ahead and make a decision about using KD electromagnetic uncouplers. Now, I didn't cover how you electrify these and control them. That will be in a future video. So don't ask me how you do it, because I will be doing a video to show you how you electrify these, control them, what type of mechanisms you can use, etc. So hang on until I get that video shot in a week or two. In the meantime, have a great week, have a great weekend, and I'll see you here next week with another video from the DCC Guy. Bye now.